Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. It's Christmas Eve at the time of recording and I've dug out one of my favourite jumpers. Now, I don't really think I need it though because outside it is unusually mild for the time of the year. So does that set the theme for the next 2 weeks as we head into 2025, or will there be a big change? Well, let's start with the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Christmas Eve. Now, the reason for the mild conditions is that we've got high pressure centred to the south and therefore very mild air is being pulled up from the southwest and moving across the UK. It is mostly dry though, just some dampness there in western counties. The highest temperatures are likely to be in the east, to the east of high ground, and it's possible that the 15.6 Celsius, which is the current record, could be challenged. Outbreaks of rain, they're just staying off to the northwest, but as I run the sequence, what we see is those push into northern Scotland at times through the coming days, but high pressure really continues to dominate across southern and central regions. Now, as we head into the weekend, a change starts to develop, at least on this computer model run, because from this point onwards, forecast confidence quickly falls away. You can see for outbreaks of rain around Scotland and Northern Ireland by Saturday. Now, look what happens. Those outbreaks of rain push southeastwards and much colder air moves into the north. Another deep area of low pressure crosses eastwards. It brings some rain, sleet and some heavy snow, some strong winds into northern Britain. And then by the end of the week, into the start of the second week, we've got areas of low pressure tracking eastwards across the southern half of the UK, at least potentially, and they bring a risk of rain, sleet and snow with that cold air sweeping down from the Arctic. But by this point, don't pay any attention to the details, because when I look at the other deterministic models a little bit later, you'll see that there are significant differences about how things will be developing. Here's the jet stream and upper air temperature profile. You can see to begin with, the mottled shaded area is heading to the north of the UK, and the orange over the United Kingdom is indicating a very, very mild air aloft. As I run this, what we see is that mild air remains in place for some time, but then the jet stream begins to sink southwards later on, and the blue and purple shading indicating the cold Arctic air is making inroads at least into the north. But as I said already, there's a good deal of uncertainty about exactly what things will be looking like at the end of the first week. But just to show some surface charts to illustrate the conditions which we can expect at least in the shorter term. So Christmas Day, it looks like it's going to be dry across virtually the whole of the United Kingdom, maybe just some patchy rain pushing into the far north, particularly later on. I think it's extremely unlikely that anywhere there is going to record even a technical white Christmas. It's not totally out of the question because there is somewhat colder air going to be feeding into northern Scotland through the second half of the day. But basically, it's a green and mild Christmas across all areas. You can see temperatures into double figures widely. Moving forwards to Boxing Day, not a great deal changes. Those patchy outbreaks of rain edge a little bit further south across the northern half of the UK, but the message is mild and dry for many. By Friday, temperatures may be dipping down a little bit. Further outbreaks of rain into the far north, Northern Ireland perhaps as well. Then into the weekend, really not a great deal of change according to this. These charts are from the UKV model, which is the Met Office high resolution one, as opposed to the animations which were generated from the American GFS. Although at this point you can see it is starting to turn colder in Scotland. There's a little bit of pink shading there, indicating a chance of sleet or snow showers, particularly over the mountains. But in southern and central regions there, temperatures still into double figures. Going back to the GFS-based charts, because the UKV model doesn't run this far ahead, Sunday the 29th is when the GFS thinks the excitement starts to develop, because we've got stronger winds there in the north, more persistent outbreaks of rain, and if you look up to the far northwest for pink shading there, indicating sleet or snow. So change beginning to take place, although it's still relatively mild in southern and central regions especially. But by Tuesday, the 31st, New Year's Eve, it's all happening. We've got a deep area of low pressure pulling away eastwards. Very tightly packed isobars here in northeastern Britain, indicating gales or severe gales. Heavy snow showers as well in the north, and there's some rain there in the south. You can see the temperature profile on the right. It illustrates it quite nicely. It's double figures in the south, but sub-zero over the Scottish Highlands. But this is really an extreme example. I wasn't that keen on using it because I think it's very unlikely to verify. But the general trend, I think, is maybe indicated, which is for colder air to start pushing into the northern half UK towards the end of the first week. But as I say, this is really probably overemphasizing the risk of snow in the north and severe gales. Here's the Mogreps G plot showing temperatures for Edinburgh, and I think that just this reinforces the message. You can see there's good agreement for it to be relatively mild through the first few days, but then there's a dip here, maybe some colder air coming into the mix, and towards the end of the first week there, as we go towards the new year, the spread starts to increase, and a few runs are bringing in very cold conditions, but quite a few are persisting with a milder outlook, so much uncertainty. Just wanted to highlight as well the possibility of very windy conditions. I've already mentioned that with the animation and some of the GFS charts. You can see here, this is for Edinburgh from the 28th to the 1st of January. A number of runs are indicating gusts of over 50 miles an hour. So I think for New Year's Eve, obviously it's a very, very big event in Scotland. It's worth keeping an eye on the short range forecast because there's a chance of it turning very windy by then, and that could cause some problems. Rainfall, the aggregates for days 0 to 5 from the ECM and GFS models. Only significant in Western Scotland on both of them. In fact, 0 millimetres according to the GFS on the right there in much of England and Wales, and only 1 or 2 according to the ECM. Moving forwards to the 0 to 10 day accumulations. At the time of filming, the ECM update wasn't available to me, so just for GFS here, but it's indicating a more changeable or unsettled pattern. The highest total still in the northern half of the UK. You can see the orange shading there, Western Scotland. But also central and eastern counties of England now have between 15 and 30 millimetres. So they've gone up from basically 0 to 15 and 30 between days 5 and 10. So definitely an indication here of it turning more unsettled. But in more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare? Do they support this trend towards more unsettled and cold weather towards the end of the first week? Here's the GFS, Tuesday the 31st of December, so it's New Year's Eve. There's the area of low pressure which is running eastwards. It's going to be bringing the rain, sleet and snow and the colder air moving down on its western flank as it pulls away. The Canadian model, though, looks a little bit different. It has a colder air pushing down across the northern half of the UK, but there isn't that nasty area of low pressure. The German icon, different once more. The cold air here, not yet really making inroads with low pressure there, just centred to the north of Scotland. The ECM model, so the European, again, it's probably a little bit closer, I think, to the icon. There is an area of low pressure air tracking eastwards to the north, across northern Scotland, but the cold air at this stage only really making it into the far north. The European artificial intelligence model, low pressure air centred to the northwest, relatively mild air covering most of the country at this point. And finally, the UK Met Office Global, quite different. High pressure from the south, still dominant. There's a very mild feed still pushing up around it, not as mild as it has been, but I should say relatively mild really. This is quite different to the other deterministics. The previous ones had significant differences in the details. This has much bigger differences because it's this high pressure dominated scenario. So taking them all together, I think the likely scenario for the end of week one is that it will be turning more changeable or unsettled. There's a growing risk of cold air pushing down into the north of UK, but especially Scotland. So the chance of snow could be increasing, as will be the chance of showers or longer spells of rain, also strong winds. It's most likely to be staying drier in southern and central areas at this point. Now, does that trend towards a more wintry outlook, colder conditions continue as we head into and through week two? It is just about the general direction of travel, of course, at this range, so not the details. Here's the 16-day GEFS plot for London. The upper air temperature profile across the top is indicating a big spread. The thick black line is the 30-year norm. The thick purple line is the average of all the runs in the ensemble. I'm going to throw in a little caveat here. I think the biggest cluster of runs is actually bringing in rather cold air, and that is being offset in terms of the mean by a few which are going for very mild conditions at this level. So the most likely outcome is that colder air will be pushing down into the south as we go through the second week. The precipitation risk along the bottom suggests that it could well be quite wet to start off with, but the number of spikes there decreases, so perhaps areas of low pressure coming into play. Later on, high pressure may be becoming more influential once more. But is that precipitation going to be rain or snow? Well, the snow row values across the bottom there reach a maximum of 9 at the start of the period. That could go up to 33 theoretically, so 9 suggests a little bit less than a bit more than a quarter, a bit less than a third. Snow, therefore, isn't entirely out of the question, but it's a relatively low chance down in southern Britain at this stage. And as ever, don't forget the snow row does not indicate accumulations, it's just snow to be falling, and it could just be a few flakes. The 2 metre temperature data tables for London, more dark green starts to appear as we head through week two. Those are runs going for a maximum during the daytimes of between 1 and 5 degrees. The overnight lows are also dipping. There's more blue starting to appear, sub-zero, so frosty conditions according to those, and quite a lot of dark green as well. So I think the trend here is, at least for colder conditions, to be developing as we head through the second week, but it's not a certainty by any means. In fact, if you look towards the end of the second week, the amount of light green and yellow is beginning to rise. Up to Manchester, and the story here is similar, but maybe the negative anomaly there is slightly clearer on the upper air temperature profile. So more runs here, bringing that colder air from the north. In terms of precipitation, it's a similar story to the London plot, but the snow row values are higher. 15 is the maximum there through the second week, so just under a 50% chance of snow falling. The 2 metre temperature data tables, similar pattern here, albeit at a lower level, so there's more blues in the overnight lows and more dark green through the afternoon maximums, and that fits in with the idea that the cold will be moving down from the north rather than the east, although the amount of light green also trends upwards towards the end of the period. Glasgow, this has the most clearly defined negative anomaly. It also has the most precipitation spikes there along the bottom and the highest snow row values. The 19 there is around the 1st of January, so 19 out of 33 is the highest risk of snow according to this. I think it's once more supporting the idea of a trend towards colder and more wintry conditions, but with that said, the whole thing does look a little bit not very definite, I think, at this stage, how it's going to play out. The wind gusts for Glasgow, just worth a quick look once more to highlight the possibility of issues on New Year's Eve into the new year. This is using the GEFS data. You can see a few runs there are going up to or above 60 miles an hour around the 1st of January or maybe a day or two afterwards. So do keep up to date with the short range forecast as the time approaches. Here are the 2 metre temperature data tables for Glasgow. Definitely the coldest of the 3 locations by a considerable margin, I would say. Even through the days there's quite a lot of blue, so plenty of runs are keeping temperatures at or below freezing point. The trend is probably upwards towards the very end there. The overnight lows, if there's even a little bit of purple there, which doesn't appear very often, those are runs going below -8 degrees and a very high risk of frost developing on most of the nights through the second week, at least in this part of Scotland. So this is where the coldest conditions are likely to be in the northern half of Britain. Rainfall. The ECM probability charts here show the chance of 5 or more millimetres of rainfall through the first 3 days of week 2. The greatest risk is at the start there in the north, the northwest, and then moving forwards to the next 3 days, the chance is reducing in all areas, but it's still the western parts of Britain, Northern Ireland as well, where the percentage chance is the highest. I just wanted to quickly show the snow depth forecasts from the GEFS for week 2. The animation here runs through the first 6 days of 2025. And as ever with these, you might want to freeze it just to take a closer look. But the message from them is there's a high risk of accumulating snow in the north, but especially over the hills. It's moderate in central areas and low to the south of the M4 corridor. So it's actually quite a wintry picture which has been painted. And the mean surface level pressure data table for York, I think, helps to show why, because through the first few days there's lots of green in these columns, lots of blue there as well, a bit of purple. Those are runs which are showing a low pressure having influence, so there will probably be quite a lot of precipitation in the mix. Later on, the yellows and oranges return, so high pressure is becoming more influential. The GEFS snapshot pressure chart for the 6th of January, for the 3rd of January, sorry, gives quite a possibility of quite a wintry picture, but especially in the north. That's where the cold air is going to be focused, but it could be pushing down into southern counties. And the ECM ensemble plot for the same time is fairly similar. There's maybe more amplification there in the Atlantic, which would allow the colder Arctic air to feed southwards. Now, with that said, there are also indications here of higher pressure to the south, and that's often the spells the death knell of cold spells in southern Britain. At least it has done in many recent years, when high pressure builds northwards across Spain, across France, and it prevents that cold air from sinking southwards. It's a very typical pattern. So I think this chart raises more questions than it answers. So to summarise, week 1, very mild with patchy spells of rain in the north through the first few days. Later on though, it begins to turn more unsettled and the chance of colder conditions increases, mostly in the northern half of the United Kingdom. There is a risk of rain and strong winds, possibly snow as well, particularly over high ground in Scotland. Week 2, more changeable or unsettled through the first few days with rain, strong winds and snow all being risks. Snow is most likely in the north, but it could spread southwards, at least into central counties. Lots of uncertainty as those colder conditions head down across the UK. Later on, the trend is for drier weather to return. The frost risk probably becomes quite widespread, but there is a chance of wintry showers in the north and the east. Note, an important footnote there. A milder outlook with high pressures centred to the south is possible. Some computer model runs are still indicating that scenario. Well, there we have it. A lot's taking place through the next couple of weeks as we head towards the end of 2024 into 2025. In particular, a sign there that winter could be returning, but much too early to be confident about the details and the extent of the risk of any snow. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, then if you did, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Of course, stay up to date with the day-to-day developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Well, all that remains for me to do now is to wish you all a very, very happy Christmas and to thank you for your ongoing support through 2024. Thanks very much now. Bye.